Selling is nothing more than finding out where somebody is, finding out where they want to be. I will do everything in my power to get you over the line. But you've got to have that level of integrity, which means you have to believe so much in what you do that you're willing to stand behind it. They've got some conception about sales that selling is about trying to, in essence, get someone to do something they don't actually want to do. Selling is both a science and an art, and you need to be good at both of those things. But you first got to come from the belief that selling is good.
Is public speaking, selling from the stage, a scam? This was one of the questions I asked my next guest. Hi, it's Rob Moore here. Now, this is a very special landmark episode because I recently launched my Disruptors series of just 43 NFTs. One of the perks in investing in one of my NFTs was that you can own one of my podcast episodes for life. And in this landmark episode, Andy Harrington was the first. He purchased Disruptors NFT series #1. And he is regarded as one of the best public speaking trainers and public speakers in the world. And we've discussed in detail the world of public speaking, the world of pitching and selling and the ethics of it. Andy's website is andyharrington.com, and if you search on social media for Andy Harrington, you can follow him on all major social media channels. Now, to get access to Andy Harrington's storytelling secrets, make sure you go now to andyharrington.com/story. But before we dive in, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notification bell on. Andy, welcome to Disruptors.
Thank you very much, it's a pleasure.
I reckon this has been 15 years in the making, would you say?
Yeah, sounds like some kind of epic movie.
I remember seeing the first time I ever met you, you didn't know me, I knew you.
Right.
Warren Bourget's speaking event.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That was 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. And sadly, he took his own life.
Yeah, he was one of my mentors in a way.
Wow. It's funny, isn't it, how the universe crosses paths. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So I want to jump straight in with a question about leadership.
Okay.
Do all good leaders have to be good speakers?
Good question. Perhaps not, but somebody in an organisation definitely does. So, you know, for you, for example, you and Mark, and you and Mark are a perfect blend. We can call Mark a leader, but he leads in a quite different way. So if it's not going to be you, then your second person needs to be that front person who can inspire, lead. You can maybe reference also, you know, Apple, Steve Jobs was the front man, and of course you would have Wozniak in the background. So yes and no, I guess, is the answer.
So Steve Jobs, I reckon, was probably not a very good speaker when he started in business. And I reckon, as you see his keynote speeches develop, learned it. And I think sometimes people think, oh, well, they're naturally a good speaker. Say, for example, Obama, people like that. You've studied them all. I remember seeing your video when you actually picked apart Steve Jobs' speech. That was brave.
Yeah, I think it was sort of Elon Musk as well. I think I did one on him as well, I think. Yeah.
So is speaking born or learned?
Look, as with all things, you can be naturally talented at something, but that doesn't mean it's a skill. It's actually interesting because I was just figuring this out the other day. You just mentioned 15 years. I think I've just probably, having done this now for 19 years, I think I've probably just passed the 10,000 hour mark of presenting on stage or in front of a camera, at least. Probably more, if you include camera, it's probably gone past that.
Yeah.
And the moment you get to the level where, as a presenter, you're doing it unconsciously, if you want to call it that, then actually your message comes through you rather than come from you. And you kind of tap into some, what can we call it, the matrix, the super conscious, whatever you want to call it, you tap into that. Because then when your message is coming through you, the audience feel that they're important. It's like this interview. It's like you said to me beforehand when we was out there, like, should I show the questions? I went, no, definitely not. Yeah. Because then I'm already going to be thinking the worst thing anyone does as a presenter is to plan every single thing you're going to say. Because that's completely unnatural, which means you'll sound unnatural and too canned. And your message, because...
But politicians do that all the time. They read a script.
Yeah, exactly. And I...
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And whilst I understand why they would do that because they don't want to make mistakes, that inherently misses that leadership part you're speaking about. The moment you go slightly off-piste, it's risky, which is why they don't do it. But as a leader or an inspiration, you have to do that, because there is a state you can get into when you're in front of a group or you're performing, you get into that state, you'll actually say things that are better than what you wrote down. Because you're in an inspired state. There's a difference between writing for a page and performing on a stage. Those are two different things. So the answer is, are they born or are they, honed? Look, to be good at anything, you've got to take that talent and turn it into a skill, and that will only come by doing it. But I don't actually believe in practice per se. I believe in getting on the stage and doing it. So your practice needs to be live. Just get yourself out there and do it. What's the worst that can happen is, well, you learn something, right? So just get out there and get doing. Otherwise you get stuck in it, I'm not ready, and you never get out there, never get done.
So I didn't fully explore the first question, so I want to go back there, because you said a leader doesn't have to be a great speaker, but needs someone in the organisation that is. That actually sounds to me like leadership needs a great speaker.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Why?
Because leadership is about communication. You've got to communicate a brand, a message, or you've got to convince people that you can help them solve a problem of some kind from a sales perspective. And it doesn't matter how technically advanced we get as human beings, the way we do business, the way that we lead is through presentation, through communication. Whether that's done online or in person, those things now can be both. But for me, someone has to lead. You can't lead just by standing. You can't lead just by looking. You've got to lead by communicating. And people need inspiration, but also they need certainty. So, as you probably know as well as I do, is that, people move towards where certainty exists, where there's confidence. And if you haven't got that, if you can't radiate that confidence, no one's going to move towards you. Staff aren't going to move towards you because they're not going to buy into that vision that you have. Your audience and or your clients won't move towards you because, from a client perspective, they're probably in a place where they're in complete uncertainty around a particular area of their life that's not working. And so you've got to communicate. Not only have you got a solution to their problem that gets them from A to B, but you've got to demonstrate in a way that they buy into your certainty, because there has to be, it's trust, isn't it? In the end, you're communicating that they can trust you, that you care, and that you've got some kind of vision, approach or method that's going to deliver for them. And that's the same for staff as well, isn't it? They've got to buy into your vision that you can support them. They're probably uncertain about their next career move. You need to be certain. The only way you can do that is through a presentation, in my opinion, at least anyway.
So if I think of someone like Obama, many people I know believe his policies weren't great.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they were, but many people I know believe his policies weren't great. And so maybe technically as a president, they wouldn't rate him maybe anywhere near the top. But he was a great orator. So what's more important for a president? Technical ability and policy and knowledge of politics, or to be a great orator?
Who gets remembered the most? It depends what your outcome is, doesn't it? We probably don't even call Churchill necessarily one of the best people in the same way, but he's remembered the most. So it depends, it's all timing perhaps also, isn't it? What's important at that time for that country, what kind of leadership do they need at that moment? Because it often depends on what's been before. What's been before.
Rebellion against previous.
Right.
Yeah.
Look at Trump, for example. It's like it's chalk and cheese.
Everyone
compared
wants
to
him back
Obama.
now that I see on social media.
Yeah, I spoke alongside Donald Trump as well, and he's a fantastic presenter, and very humorous. And again, also, you talked earlier about politicians have it all planned. Well, he's somebody who didn't. Right?
Yeah.
No, he made a few gaffes doing that, obviously, which is the risk, but it makes them charismatic. And that's also an important part for a leader.
So if you were Prime Minister or President, would you go along the lines of, your advisors in your ear telling you to script a speech? Or would you have an unscripted speech?
Yeah, so I think you need a framework for a speech at the very least. Because otherwise, you could end up going completely left field. So you need a structure, but that structure, in my opinion, certainly, I mean, I've never written politicians' speeches, so I'm probably speaking outside my comfort zone. But in essence, you need a framework for a talk. But that framework, in my opinion, needs to leave freedom of expression. So it's not so tight that it's framed word by word. But like in the first few minutes, okay, here's my outcome. Here's what I want to achieve in that first 2 or 3 minutes. Here's what I want to achieve. And that's what the script writer is doing anyway. They have orchestrated it in such a way that it's chunked into, okay, in the first 3 minutes we need to achieve this or make them feel this, and so on. But chunking a level of words just means it's much harder to deliver as a personality. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to that time when I was watching you on stage for the first time.
Okay.
Because Mark, myself, and our previous boss at the time, honestly, we were like, wow, because you inspired people into action. Okay. I had never seen a presentation where someone could inspire so many people to make an investment, speak to sell, presentation for profit.
Right.
And, we were all like, wow. And Mark was just like, wow, because Mark could see money. I was wow because I'm not a jealous person at all, but I was 10% jealous I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
Which actually was part of the inspiration of doing it. So could you take us through your journey of becoming a professional speaker, having, the professional speakers university that you do, and just put everyone in the picture on, your journey?
Yeah, so before I even got into speaking and presenting, my first business was an IT recruitment business, and then while I was going through that evolution, I started with like 10 grand. We borrowed from the Abbey National. Told them to go buy a car with it. We didn't. We actually started a business with it. But that business,
because if you tell them that, they won't lend you the money.
No, correct.
It's crazy, isn't it?
No, if they were going to buy some depreciating asset, apparently that was fine.
Yeah.
But to generate money out of it, perhaps wasn't. But anyway, you basically do stuff and ask for forgiveness later. That's normally a better way than asking for permission. So, for entrepreneur at least, anyway. And about that sort of time as I had that business, my partner at the time, she was going through some stuff that had gone through, and she ended up being really depressed. And I went to see Tony Robbins because I didn't know what the hell to do with the situation. I had no answers. And I came across his infomercial on TV from Tony Robbins, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. So I called the company up, and the sales rep convinced me not to buy the product, which is probably about $149, and I ended up spending about $20,000 instead, flying over to the Orange County Convention Center in Florida to go and see Tony Robbins. And I'd never seen this before, and everyone's on stage dancing and stuff, and I thought, this is some weird cult. Honestly, I did.
And now I bet people say that about you.
Well, no, exactly, yeah, quite right. Yeah. Sub-story later on, I tried to pretend to be Tony Robbins, and that fell flat. I'll come back to that in a bit. So anyway,
he is 8'6", so there's an issue there.
Correct, yeah. His teeth are bigger than me. Yeah. So what happened in that event is that he ended up working with a one-to-one, doing a live intervention. I didn't know what this stuff was.
With your previous partner?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like 5,000 people in this room. And we were VIP seats because we bought this package. And he worked with a one-to-one, giant screens all around. And there's a camera on the stage looking directly at her, beaming her into the giant screens. And he's doing an intervention. And he literally changed her life. And I was 45 minutes, and I checked her into the Priory Hospital, and nothing was working. And then 45 minutes, an hour later, it's completely changed. I thought, this is damn good. And then my voice went off and said, hey, maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you're meant to be like that guy. And I thought, well, who's going to listen to me? What do I know? And so I didn't do anything with it. I had a kind of little mild idea about it, but it wasn't until another event that we'd already pre-purchased about 6 months later, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, another event with Tony, and right at the very end, towards the end of it, day 6, I think, we had to pair up the stranger in. It's weird stuff you do in events, where you stare into somebody's eyes, like way inside the intimate zone. Yeah. And I'm a real introvert. You and I are similar. You're definitely off the charts introvert compared to me, but I am quite introverted. So I'm sitting this one out thinking, I'm not going to do this weird shit. And and then this idea hits me. The only person left in the room that didn't have a partner was Tony Robbins. So I thought, okay, and I'm like in the trance now, and I'm walking down the aisles. I kind of get past a few of the guards who are meant to stop idiots like me, and I motioned to Mr. Robbins, would he be my partner for this exercise? And by complete surprise, he agreed. And I got to have 5 minutes of intimacy with Tony Robbins that changed my life in that moment, because I literally was staring at his eyes. I became so emotional, so like, oh my goodness, like I was so grateful actually for what he'd done. And I was crying, and he started crying as well. I thought, this is like mad, this is weird. And in that moment I said, I'm going to do it. Yeah. That's my moment where I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find a way to try and do something similar to what he's done. And I'm now 19 years into that journey. So.
Wow. And you've probably trained more public speakers in this country than anyone I know.
Maybe.
Which is a pretty amazing legacy if you think about it.
I didn't start off doing that. I started out just teaching only, mindset, motivation, all that kind of very important stuff, which it's still my first love, and it's still imbued within the training that I do. And that probably is one of the things that gives me an edge, is because, as a presenter and speaker, you can't just teach people what to do, because they'll know what to do, but they won't do it. You have to find out, you've got to get under the skin, and you've got to move them into a place where they completely believe that change is possible. Because we're all doing that. We're all selling change. Every business sells change. If you're selling a service, you're selling change. Clients here wants to be there. But most people, they're more afraid of change. They're more afraid of the solution than they are of the problem.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's true, isn't it? Because the problem they live with. I've got coping mechanisms for that, thank you. But see, this solution, then that carries fear of risk, failure, ridicule, loss. And so, there's a dynamic that plays out. So if you as a speaker don't recognize that, you'll be very disappointed with the number of people who don't actually take a next step and implement what you talk about, because you're missing an important bit. Don't just tell them, here's the what and the how to do it. You've got to find what is going to be the thing that gets underneath you, lights a fire in you, and makes you take the action. Yeah.
And why did you therefore focus on public speaking? Obviously, you've got your Speakers University, you've got your academy, you've got a massive set of mentees and professional speakers under your company umbrella. But why did you zone in on that and niche on that?
I think because I naturally became good at it over time, because I'd at that time probably done it for about 6 or 7 years. And actually, from a pure business perspective, only teaching mindset and making that a good business isn't easy, because it's a soft skill.
And also, it's hard to sell an outcome.
Correct.
Isn't it? A result.
Yeah, correct. And so people invest more in a speaker's training, or here's how I create my content, whatever. People can invest more in that because they can see an end game. Whereas motivation, mindset, is actually probably more important than that. But they'll invest less in that because they feel like, I don't really need that. But consequently, they probably do need it more than ever.
So we've got a few sections here, and we're going to do a bit of a fun quick fire round towards the end.
Right.
And I want to get into some nitty gritty practical stuff as well.
I like knit and grit.
I know you do. You like it. But there's a couple of elephants in the room of public speaking I'd like to get into first.
Yes.
So a couple of things I've heard in the last 15 years.
Yes.
It's been said of me, it's been said of you, and it's been said of anyone who's in this industry. A couple of things. Number one is, should you be the same on stage as off stage? Because I've heard critics say, they're giving it the big I am on the stage and it's completely different off the stage. Should you be the same person on the stage as off the stage? That's the first one.
Yeah, I think you should have the same values on stage as off stage, but it's also perhaps, for you to have the same level of intensity in your conversation with people would probably make you very weird.
Yeah.
And also, what makes someone very good off stage is their ability to listen, ask questions, open people up, be genuinely curious. On stage, you're probably not doing that. You're doing the opposite. You're leading and you're presenting and you're performing. So it's more like an accelerated version of you there, but you're using different attributes of yourself at the same time. So you can't really compare the two things. But what is important is that you would never do something on stage that you wouldn't do off stage. So an example of that would be, and this is you'll recognise this, when somebody says, as a speaker says, so they make some kind of statement. They say, do you agree with that? Yes or yes? Right? And so it's the audience. Now, if I said that to you and we were having a conversation, what do you think? Do you agree with that, Rob? Yes or yes? You go, fuck off. Like, you're manipulating me. You're not giving me a choice. And that's an issue. So it's like you feel like you can get away with it on stage doing that, but actually when you think about it, you're just showing your hand. And like, what's the problem with yes or no would be the right answer.
Or does that make sense?
Does that make sense? Yes or no? Whatever. So either way, the word no is completely fine, because if there's someone in the audience that doesn't agree, I'd rather know that. So it's either feedback that my content, I didn't explain it very well, or it's an opportunity to help that person to see the world or something in a different way. So I don't want to be afraid of that word, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Something I was taught in the early days of public speaking, what I actually think's awful. I was taught by a speaker to say, I know what you're thinking. As a read on the stage, maybe as an hypnotic linguistic tool. But if someone says to me, I know what you're thinking, I think, no, you fucking don't. Yeah. You have no idea what I'm thinking. So it could actually be a really bad rapport break to make that assumption.
So what you would do there is you'd use a softening phrase. So understand what the reason is that person is saying that, I know what you're thinking, is because it's a segue into what you might say next, right? Yeah. As in the next bit of content. But your better way to say it, so now what you might be thinking, Ray, what you might be thinking now is the X, Y, and Z. And if you were thinking that, then, well, let me explain what I mean. And then that's the better segue. Yeah. So use a softening phrase like might, maybe, perhaps. These are softening phrases that keep rapport and don't have someone have jarring effect.
So this is making me want to talk about language.
Yeah.
Because it's not actually in my questions, but clearly the technicality of language is really important. So maybe we'll come to that in a moment. The big elephant in the room in speaking, and, you're all about presentation for profits.
Yes.
You want to help people make money. Is the selling element of it. So I know I've seen some speakers speak and sell and I've thought, wow, that is an art form. What you've done there is magic and alchemy. I've also seen some people speak and sell and I've been somewhat not disgusted, but I'm like, ugh. So to anyone who thinks that speaking from the stage and doing the pitch is yucky, and it shouldn't be done, let's talk about that and let's maybe educate people.
Yeah, so you first got to take out the stage stuff first and talk about selling in general, because people who don't like being sold to, if they're sitting in an audience, probably just don't like being sold to full stop, because they've got some conception about sales that selling is about trying to, in essence, get someone to do something they don't actually want to do. But selling is nothing more than finding out where somebody is, finding out where they want to be, and if you generally have a solution that bridges the gap between where they are and where they want to be, then my view is, if I know you need what I've got and you're stuck, and I find out that you really need it, like, I will do everything in my power to get you over the line. Because I know, having done it for many years, once you get over here, you're going to say, thanks for helping make that decision, right? But you've got to have that level of integrity, which means you have to believe so much in what you do that you're willing to stand behind it, right? Now, of course, what you're talking about is the speakers that actually don't deliver here, and they're very good at selling it, but that's what they're really interested in, is the selling of it. So when you get down here, either they haven't yet developed over time their solution so that it's robust and doesn't have any holes in it, or they just don't care once they've had people's money. So, but there's an art form in selling. Selling is both a science and an art, and you need to be good at both of those things. But you first got to come from the belief that selling is good. Because if you have the belief that selling isn't, then when somebody makes the comment like you did, you're going to get attracted to that comment. It might either you again defend yourself, which you shouldn't, or you don't need to, or you're going to start changing your approach because the world around you says you can't do it that way.
So where is the line, in your view, between persuasion and manipulation?
Intent. It's your intent. If I want to get the money out of you, right, then if I'm persuading you to do something that's going to harm you and hurt you, then I will win in the short term, you will lose in the short term, but I will lose in the long term. Because everything we do has to be ecological, so it needs to be good for me, feel good for me, it must be good for me, it must be good for others and serve the greater good. But
I noticed the little distinction you did there.
Yeah.
Feel good for me versus be good for me.
Yeah, because sometimes you
because
can do
they're
something...
very different.
Well, because you can sometimes do something that feels good, but it's actually not good for you.
Yes.
Right, so in the moment it might feel good to sell to someone because you just made some money, but is it good for you? No, it's not. Is it good for others? No. So that's, in essence, that is what I'd call a class, this is Tony Robbins stuff, class 3 behaviour, right? It's something you're addicted to doing, but it's not good, right? And what you've got to do is abandon that and find a better way. Something that is good for you, serves others, serves the greater good, and feels good as well. And then once you do that, then you've got a healthy addiction, if that makes sense. Yeah. That means you are on your mission. You've found your thing that you're gifted to do. But anything you do that inherently within inside of you that maybe you don't display outside, inherently makes you feel shame or makes you feel uncomfortable inside, will eventually catch up with you.
What was interesting, I just picked up on something you said. You said you shouldn't defend yourself. Why not?
Yeah. You don't have, and then I changed it. I said you don't have to defend yourself.
No.
Now you can defend yourself, but you're not. It's not the right. Perhaps it's not the right thing to say defend yourself. It's okay. From your point of view, you might, for example, talk about that on social media posts, but you're really doing that not because you want to convert that person. You're not trying to take them from a hater to a lover, right? To a fan. Because they can't be converted.
No, I'm often doing it for everyone else watching.
Correct, exactly right. So we create that distinction. But if you are doing it because you need this person's validation in order for you to feel that you can carry on saying and doing what you do.
Hole, that is, isn't it?
If that's, and this is the big thing about leadership, if we now expand leadership speaking, whatever it might be, as a speaker, as a presenter, if you go out there and you need people to validate everything that you say and do, then you are screwed. Like you're going to struggle.
Did you ever need that in your journey?
Of course, everywhere in the beginning. In the beginning, once you're new to this, it's really good to have very supportive audiences, right? Because and here's the challenge though. When I first went to doing it, same as you go out and you do your free talk somewhere. The free audience is the most hostile audience you'll ever have because they haven't paid anything to be there. They're already skeptical, and they're like honestly, they're probably stand on stage. They go like, right, teach me something, you little shit. It's like,
and change my mind.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to kind of earn that right over time, but you have to be so certain in what you do because if any part of you is uncertain about what you believe, and that's the key. Let's talk about that because great presenters don't share information. Stop teaching people what you know and start sharing what you believe. And those are two different things. Right. What you know and what you believe are two different things. When you share what you believe, there's a conviction in your voice that you own. And even if somebody else doesn't believe the same as you, it doesn't matter because this is my belief. Yeah. Right? This is my truth. And that's what you're looking to do. You're looking to go out there and find people who need to believe what you believe. Right? Because your belief shapes how you think. How you think shapes how you feel. Your feelings will determine your decisions, and your decisions determine your actions. So if you want better actions, you've got to trace that all the way back to beliefs, which means that you have to understand in a presentation, you've got to say to yourself, okay, what is it that I believe that gets me the results that I have? And what are the beliefs that my audience typically have that are holding them back? You create stories, you create content that is deliberately designed to challenge and change those beliefs. Because only when that happens does their mind open and then they might be ready to hear the message. Because it's like, so many people, you probably had it before, you say a similar message and people go like, I've never heard you say that before. And you've said it almost every single time, but now they hear you. Yeah. Now they see you because something happened. They, for whatever reason, they heard that belief was different in that moment and then they absorbed it.
Yeah, this is great. Does every speaker have a big ego?
does every speaker have a big ego? A lot of the really good ones probably do in the beginning. Maybe you almost are that in the beginning, but the great ones, eventually that fades away. Because I probably did in the beginning as well. And, you hear the feedback from people, like people might sort of saw me, I don't know, like 10 years ago or something. Like, oh, you really seem different now, like softer, more authentic. And you grow into the authenticity of that. And it's like you don't need the ego anymore. You don't have to pump yourself up anymore because you know. So there's a knowing that comes across. So even like Tony Robbins, for example, in the beginning it was personal power, and now it's much more, it's not quite the same now. The message has a different flavour. It's a more spiritual coming through you kind of message, and you don't need to pump yourself up anymore. But in the beginning, look, well, mate, what I'll tell you is that this is go back to that thing I was saying. So when I thought when I first started, like, remember I said I would be like Tony Robbins, right? And so, he started his events with like dancers on stage and stuff. So I'd literally, my first ever event, it was 76 people. It was the Cavendish Conference Centre in London, which is like all the seats are tiered up and the speakers lower down. And people walked in from a hard day's work in London, 7 o'clock to my free event, skeptical audience. And they find on stage dancing, I'm not there, but my mum's there, my sister's there, my father-in-law and my partner's there, dancing on stage. And so people walked in and went, no, just walked straight back out again. And so, and I'd run on stage to let me entertain you. And I was like, such a dick.
Did you have the big Madonna microphone coming down the side of the face?
I literally everything. And I didn't, what happened, look, that gets you out the gate, right? Because you're modelling somebody. So you lean on someone you admire and you don't realise you're...
Because everyone has to start somewhere, don't they?
Yeah, you realise you're doing it, but it's kind of like you need to lean on it because that certainty, that works.
And you're trying to find yourself and your own style.
Correct. And eventually that facade fades away, or you have a big failure, and then it fades away, you come back, and then there's an authenticity that comes through. That's my story, at least, anyway, what happened to me.
I bet you're glad there were no camera phones back then.
I actually
imagine all of that.
Dude, I have a video somewhere, I still have it, and it's a video of me at the Novotel in Heathrow, and I run on, and there's dancers on stage, right, and they pan around the audience, about 100 people there, and they're doing the Tony Robbins clap dance on the stage, so everybody else is meant to copy. There are literally 5 people in the audience standing up going, and everybody else is sitting there thinking, when's this going to end? Like, and it's just literally the most embarrassing thing because I wasn't Tony Robbins. This is not an American audience, and it just didn't work. It took me about 6 months to give that up.
One thing I want to say to everyone watching and listening is that journey is okay, because I think about this in my journey of the Disruptors brand, which is 6 years this podcast has been going, and we've just rebranded it to Disruptors.
Yep.
From Disruptive Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I know along my journey, I've had these moments of, I think this is who I am. Or, I feel comfortable here and not here. But I had to go on that journey for many years to have those awakening moments. But what I wouldn't want anyone to think listening is, you have to find authenticity from day one, because sometimes it can take many years to evolve through you. Would you agree with that?
I think it's almost inauthentic to think that you can find authenticity. Like everything we do, you learn how to do by doing it, which inherently means when you do it, you'll be rubbish at it. And so, like we learn to walk before we're ready.
Yeah.
You learn to talk before you're ready. You learn to laugh before you're ready. Everything you've ever done, you've done before you're ready. That's how you get ready.
Yeah.
But doing it, you figure out. I mean, I've never been to a dinner party yet where, the host invites the husband and he's crawling on his hands and knees. Sorry, he hasn't figured out this walking thing yet. Figure it out. You do something often enough, that's the thing, isn't it? If you do anything often enough, you get damn good at it. You just do. Problem with most people is most adults, they give up after, 7 attempts and it didn't work out. That's the difference.
Amen. So a lot of people reckon that ego is the enemy. I'm still on this ego thing, but
didn't like my
maybe no. Or maybe Freud would have something to say about me. But is ego really all bad? I mean, you said when every speaker starts that you've seen, there's some of that there. I mean, can there be something good in ego?
Well, firstly, the word ego and the concept of ego is exactly that. It's only a concept. It doesn't actually exist. It's a labeling of something or some behavior. So if we're saying ego is that you are inwardly focused and it's about you, for example, well, that's okay, because look at Maslow's model, Tony Robbins, whatever. There are two opposing forces that you need. Number one is, let's go back. So you need certainty, right, and you need variety, change. But you also need significance, as in, I am amazing at something. And then you've got connection. So what makes a great leader is someone who is significantly good at something that makes them attractive. People are attracted to that skill, knowledge, know-how, whatever it is that person has. And that makes them very significant. But what makes them valuable is their ability to give that. So ego, we use that word, is for getting. I am getting from you.
So maybe that's what drives you to start.
Correct.
Yeah.
But then that will, if you don't then find a way to serve with that, and it's only ever about you, or you serve in a half-assed way because it's only something you give lip service to, then you're not going to succeed because you never feel good about yourself.
No.
Because the secret of living is giving, right?
Yeah.
And that's where everything works, because everything works based on service. The whole world works, capitalism at least, works on service.
Yeah.
I have to serve in others, but you have to have something to serve with, right? But the problem is, if you only focus on your getting good at something and it's all about you, then in essence, you're almost on a search to validate yourself. You're on a search to be worthy of love.
Yeah.
But it's not love in itself. True love comes from giving, right? When you give something to others. Because you've got intrinsic value, you have an extrinsic value. And you look at money, for example. Money isn't wealth. Wealth is not measured, in my opinion, by your extrinsic value, how much money you have. It's measured by your intrinsic value. So here's a good way to think about it, is think about if money didn't exist, how valuable are you? How much intrinsic value do you have if money didn't exist? Because, years ago when we lived in villages and whatever, in tribes, then the most attractive person was the person that was the most giving, because he's the person that was owed most favours, which means that, if suddenly he needed something, then everyone will come rushing to him, we'll help you because you've served us in advance. All money is a way of keeping the IOU notes in check. So for me, you need to become, if we want to use the word ego, we can say significant, because you have to be that, because otherwise no one's going to be attracted to you.
Yeah.
But equally, then you've got to take that skill, knowledge, know-how, ability, and find a way to serve with it, whether you entertain with it, whether you teach with it, or whether you create a business that serves people either through you directly or your team or your staff or a product. You put that uniqueness and you find a way to serve. If you don't do that, you're stuffed.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who says, you're a hard seller? What would you say to them?
You're a hard seller.
That's the language people use, isn't it? Oh, that's a hard sell.
So it probably means that person is having that thought because they are not themselves a buyer at that point. Because anybody who's a real buyer, so what does it mean to hard sell? Let's think about that. It probably means that you should listen to that also, because it might mean that you have crossed the line. So you should never say, you never ever think to yourself, they're wrong. Always have that ability, because again, a successful trait is someone who has beliefs about themselves, but for a moment at least can suspend them, right? Because when we've got to act certain, right? It's a male trait to act certain. So you need to be certain as a leader, whether male or female, you've got to act certain. But if you only ever do that, and you never ever allow yourself to hang on a second, step back, and let me absorb that for a minute with all my beliefs suspended and see how that is true, you might find maybe you have been hard selling, whatever that is in that occasion. It's feedback, isn't it? Feedback is the breakfast of champions. Whether you choose to eat it or not, it's up to you.
Amen.
But you're very good at that. You're actually very good. You know, when we have our meetings, because we, belong to another group, you're very good at listening to and feedback. You actually welcome it, you bring it on. Now you have an ability to switch your energy on and say, this is what I believe, but you're also very good at suspending that belief. But that's probably happened over time. I suspect in the beginning you weren't like that. You might have been more, we're doing it this way. So
in the beginning, I took it personally and it would hurt me.
Yeah.
And I would perceive feedback as a detriment to my character. And so over time I was just able to create more space and distance between my character.
And how do you do that? It's an interesting question. You said, I was able to create space, but it's like what does that actually mean?
Well, a fucking load of money on personal development courses, definitely that. I mean, I actually worked out, we've dropped 1.4 mil on personal development courses for ourselves and our team, and it's over 15 years, and it's me and Mark and our team, but it's a lot. And actually someone was telling me how Landmark had changed their life yesterday. I'm like, I've got to do that. And there's some John DeMartini courses I haven't done. I've done a lot of this. I'm thinking I've got to do those. So, some people expect one personal development course to frickin' change them. It's definitely not that. I would say over time, I learned that who I am and what I do are different. So if I do something and someone reacts to it, they're reacting to what I do.
Yes.
But that's not a character assassination of who I am. Someone called me Putin today on a post, which I really liked actually, because Putin's probably, no one knows this, but Putin's probably the richest man in the world. People don't know this. If you could,
we might be about to find out.
Yeah, we might. But you know what? Like, I pointed out that actually some people could see that as quite a disgusting comment to call someone Putin. But in reality, I really liked it because I realised that person wasn't scared to give me feedback. Yeah. If someone can call me something, there's no fear in my reaction to it. So I actually take feedback as a compliment, because I don't want, if people are scared to give me feedback, I'm never going to grow. So I'd put a distance between who I am and what I do, which gave me the ability to not take anything personally. Also, an awareness of we're all living in our own world where we've got a dialogue of a reality we're creating, which is not reality. Right. It's either a story we tell ourselves on an ongoing basis, playing on repeat the past, or it's just a way that we receive information in the world that's very individual. And when I learned that, I realised if you say something about me that used to hurt me, I now understand you're not trying to hurt me. You're perceiving information from me through your model of the world. Yeah. So you're not actually judging me, you're judging me through yourself. Therefore, you're really speaking about yourself. Yeah, almost most of the time, you've basically pressed a button inside that person. Yes. You've fired off and they've got a belief about something they've got to reinforce. Yes. Or they perceive you to be like someone that they experience, and they basically put your head on that. They've brought all the baggage. That person's head on you. So you're quite right. So this is why, Andy, by the way, just let me jump in here. This is why I asked you about because I think you were a bit too elegant about answering the question when I said, what do you think of someone who says you're a hard seller? Because what I was going to say is they're just bringing all their baggage onto the table right there and then. Yeah, but both could be true. Yeah. Because, by the way, I love watching a sale that other people would perceive as hard. I'm like, fucking hell, that's genius. I need to learn how to do that. Yeah. And it's the same event. Yeah. And I'm always the guy running to the table first. Well, you've got to remember, in a selling environment, we're certainly one to many, you're always dividing people. You're dividing people between the buyers and the non-buyers. Do you do that on purpose? You have to. But many people don't. Well, look, because they're worried about what the non-buyers might say. Well, think about it on more of a macro sense. So there's, for every 1,000 Rob Moore fans, there are 1,000 Rob Moore haters. I'd be quite happy with those numbers. I thought it was a lot more haters.
And then you've got about 1,000 people in the middle who don't give a shit either way.
Yeah.
But what you don't want is 3,000 people who don't give a shit either way because you're just too vanilla, right? People won't move towards you unless they know what you believe. And if you're sharing a message, this is good for you, go do it, right? Just believe it, like this is a great offer, it's available today, get you over the line, go do it. Because people have problems when I say hard selling, it's more like the go do it now, scarcity incentive. But you have to give people a deadline to do anything. People don't do their homework till last minute, right?
Yeah.
People need deadlines. So if you don't give people a deadline, the same thing with a sale. When you like Harrods sale and it finishes at this time, whatever. There's deadlines to things. You have to give people, like, if you don't do X right now, there's a painful consequence.
Yeah.
There's a painful consequence if they don't do it anyway because they get to keep their problem. And I care enough about people. I care enough about people that I can help. That I will. Tony Robbins does the same thing, right? Break people's patterns. Like when my partner was in that scenario, like literally, he said something that was shocking. He said, like, "Oh, you must really love your abuser."
Wow.
She said, like, "What? You must really love your abuser? What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you just rent out space in your head for the last 20 years." I mean, like, he's not even there, but you keep thinking about it. You keep honouring him by doing that. She's like, that's like, but that is a new frame of reference. That's called hard coaching, right?
Yeah.
Right? But
and
people
I bet that
need
shocks some people.
But people need it.
Well, Tony Robbins got a bit of a rap for doing that on I Am Not Your Guru, didn't he?
Right, exactly.
Should we just talk about what happened there and what you thought about that? That'd be an
What
interesting
part
one.
specifically?
Well, I think, was it to do with the Me Too movement?
I don't think that was actually on the I'm Not Your Guru. I think it came out as a separate video that someone posted.
Yeah.
But it's from one of his events, yeah.
Yeah, what were your thoughts? Because I saw you publicly comment about when Tony Robbins was big time under fire.
Yeah, so for people that don't remember that part, he was, I can't remember the exact presenting problem, but he was doing one of his live interventions with a female. And I think he was talking about the person obviously had someone like my partner had some issues in the past. But what he was trying to attempt to do correctly was put her at cause.
As in responsible?
Yeah, not as in cause for you caused this happen, you attract it to yourself, but you're responsible for what you do about this.
Yeah.
And what he was trying to say is, don't play the victim because it's not pretty, it's not going to get you anywhere, it's just going to get you attention and reinforce the fact you are a victim, right? That's what he was trying to get across.
Yeah.
The problem was because he used a lot of his masculinity in order to try to break that pattern.
But what's wrong with that?
Because he might have fired off, in her that fear that she might have replayed that same scenario all over again.
Right.
And actually, what she did was stand up for herself.
Yeah.
Which actually, when you think about it, was exactly the right thing he wanted to happen.
Yeah.
For her to stand up against a male authority figure, perhaps.
What's wrong with being masculine?
No, he just used his, like, he was like,
right.
And he's a big guy, he was right over her, so he might have made her feel frightened. I just think he probably, from a physicality point of view, he could have done it more elegantly in this case. Still been very pattern interrupting, but not, I think he probably crossed the line on that occasion, and he probably recognised he did.
Okay. So, should we go into some practical tactics?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, let's say someone is absolutely petrified of public speaking. Apparently, it is the highest ranked fear above death and spiders. I'll take public speaking all day long over death and spiders. Give us 2 or 3 tips to get people who are nervous and scared of public speaking moving. Yeah,
good. So, one of the most important aspects of presenting and speaking is the state you get in. So people often think you need to be in a calm state. You don't. Your state will change dramatically throughout, otherwise your presentation will just be boring. So it's a weird thing, but if you think about any top level performance of anything, and we can call public speaking a performance, singing, dancing, any sport is a performance, it all happens in a zone of high performance. So the question becomes, how do you get into the zone of high performance in an area that you aren't currently high performing in? And the answer is to get your eyes into peripheral vision. That sounds really weird to say that, but peripheral vision, you've got two types of vision. You've got foveal vision, focusing on one thing. I'm threading a piece of cotton through a needle. I need foveal vision for that, but that's really stressful. Imagine threading a piece of cotton through a needle for an hour. You'd be knackered, right? Whereas peripheral vision is a wider awareness. So when you learn how to switch your mind on to that, what will happen is you will actually activate more of your unconscious mind, which is actually where all your knowledge, know-how is stored that you want to share. But if you become very focused on your message, right, you're going to overthink it. So that's like a singer who sings a song but then thinks about the words, and then that's when they mess them up.
Yeah.
Because that's unnatural. If you get passionate about something, let's say you have an argument with your partner, so you have an argument with Gemma, for example, then you can remember that. It's like yesterday, this morning.
You're bringing up all of my trauma now.
Then you haven't got to go and check your notes.
No.
Because it comes out, right? Because you're passionate in that moment, right?
Sometimes I wish I had checked my notes.
It happens, yeah. And you think about a basketball player, right? What are they doing? They're bouncing the ball, right? What they're doing, they're reading the game.
Yeah.
Right? Now you're aware the ball's there, but you don't look at it. So you're aware the kind of things you want to say, but you don't directly look at them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that gives you this kind of, enter the matrix, whatever kind of experience. And that's where you need to go. Or if you look at all professional sports players, I'm a tennis player now, I'm going to, the serve's going to come down. I'm in peripheral vision. I'm reading multiple things.
Yeah.
And I'm being intuitive. I'm stepping into that zone of performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's relaxed performance. And you can train yourself to do that. You can train yourself to do that. You can call it meditation if you like. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
You stare at one thing, right? But you become aware of everything at the same time. You drop into a little zone. So I'd encourage people to do that and then begin to present after that.
Okay, and is there any way they can practice that? Because it's interesting you say that, because that's what I have to do doing this.
Yeah.
I've got a load of questions there, and I've hardly looked at them. And if I look at my questions the whole time, you're going to hate this interview.
Yeah, because it feels like you're not listening to the answers.
Exactly. And I want to be in the moment enough. So I've asked you at least 7 things that aren't on this.
Right.
But I've also got my list of questions. So being able to be with you and with the questions and with the time that's over there and with Harry. Because I love looking at Harry, because when I look at Harry, I see his face and I always know if the interviews are going well or not.
Right.
Because so I'm looking at Harry, we've got 3 cameras over there. And so maybe interviewing people, maybe doing Facebook Lives, maybe doing some little networking events. Are they good ideas to start?
Yeah.
Or do you just do them in your living room?
I always like having a live audience because it's actually very different. So the other thing that they need to do is have a structure for the presentation. Like I said, it's a framework. So the biggest mistake people make in presentations is killing their audience with death by PowerPoint. Because what people do to get the certainty they need, rather than going to peripheral vision, they do the opposite. In fact, they stick up on their slides. They've got bullet point after bullet point after bullet point.
They turn round.
So the talk, and basically you might just give them like a sheet of paper with what's written on it, and that's it. So instead of that, you want to create models, frameworks, blueprints. So think 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? It's like a framework in a circle.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Tony Robbins has his triads, as he calls them. I've got my Serve and Sell speaker program, and that's what we teach people to do. So we teach new speakers how to create a framework that keeps things at a big picture, conceptual level to begin with.
Yeah.
So that people don't get lost with the detail. And you're selling people on a concept first, and then, if they want to go further, you dive deeper into that, and that's where the detail is.
Yeah.
But you've got to create a framework that simplifies a complex thing, so that in essence, in public speaking, we probably teach 74 different things you've got to master, but those are all part of 7 things.
Yeah.
So think folders, subfolders and files. It's how you store information on a computer. Here's the problem with most speakers, it's just files.
Yeah.
So it's like, Matt, here's a good example. So most trainers, speakers, presenters don't think like their audience. You've got to think like your audience. Is this understandable if it's not me listening to me, right? So because it's all over the place, it's not well designed, then it's a bit like having a messy desktop. Like on your desktop sometimes, you see some people's desktops, they're really messy. But they know where all the files are. Everybody else, they know, it's about there, they know where it is, right? But they're the only human who knows where it is.
Yeah.
So if you train like that, everyone's lost. You're not, but everybody else is. So think of it this way. Imagine you've got your computer, right? And there's files all over it. It's a big mess. You go to a meeting somewhere and there's a file you need in that computer, but you don't have your computer with you. But that's no problem. You can file share it, right? It's not stored in the cloud, but you can get someone to send it to you. But so you ring home, but the only person home is Nan. And you've now got to explain to Nan where that file is, and she's got to send it to you. That's going to be pretty frustrating, right? So that's what you've got to think of. You've got to organise it in that way, because not only does it mean your content's organised for them, it's organised for you. And that allows you then to settle down and focus on the audience, because every audience is unique and special, and your attention needs to be with them, because it's called a presentation for a reason, because you have to be present.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is, in a moment, I'm going to go to our quick fire round.
Okay.
Just to shake things up.
Shake it up, baby.
And then I'm going to move a couple of our deeper questions to the end.
Okay.
But one question before I do. I've noticed that you said serve and sell.
Yeah.
And presentation for profits. So could you give us a couple of tips on monetizing public speaking?
Yeah. Well, number one, people buy solutions. So you have to look. You've got two classes of speaker. You've got the kind of keynote speaker, who isn't selling anything. They get paid for doing a speech. You know, could be anything from a couple of thousand to, if you're a very successful, well-known brand, could be $500,000, for example. So you got them. And the problem with those guys is they inspire people because they talk about climbing Mount Everest or whatever. But the problem is with that leaves people without a strategy. You're just inspired. What you then need to think about is, okay, well, my audience isn't really climbing Mount Everest, but what mountain are they climbing? Maybe it's the mountain out of grief. Maybe it's the mountain of how do I make sales? Maybe it's the mountain of how do I become fitter and healthier? Maybe it's the mountain of how do I resolve my relationship? Whatever it is, you've got to figure out what's the mountain you want to be known as helping people to climb. What you want to be the Sherpa for that journey. And you figure out what those steps are, and you then turn it into what I call a UBS, a unique branded solution. That is your IP, it's your intellectual property. It's only yours, it's uniquely yours, you created it. We talked about some other ones, we talked about cashflow, quadrant, etc. You've got to create your version of the 7 habits. And then you create a presentation that goes around that. So that's the central piece of that presentation. There's many things you need to do around it. You'll need to do a beginning part, which is very different. You'll then do a story about you and why you. And you've got to introduce the overview of that solution, and then you've got to go a bit deeper into it. So you kind of prove the concept that there's some value in it. Then you've got to make a great offer. This is a structure of a classic presentation called a serve and sell, or presenting for profit. And then what people are buying from you specifically is the implementation of that thing. So don't sell information, because information's everywhere. You're selling implementation. So if you've got a framework of 7 things, then there are 3 ways you monetize it. Either you create a do-it-yourself solution. So a simple example of that is a book. You read it, but you've got to do it yourself. The implementation you're done by yourself. A done-with-you solution, which means either you and or your team is going to get with that person and work. They're going to do the implementation, but you're going to support them in doing that.
Like coaching, mentoring,
or it could even be a training course that you have, exercise in, but you've got coaches and mentors there to help them in the implementation piece during the program. Again, a lot of courses don't do that. It's just information, and people walk away with a great shelf development. So we don't do that. We have trained coaches to watch every single performance, and when you're creating the content, there's somebody there helping you. It means our courses are smaller, but it means they work, right? And so ultimately, you're either selling do-it-yourself, done with you, or even potentially done for you, right? A done for you solution is you've told them what your model and framework is of how results are got, and what you're basically saying is that this is the model I'm going to follow to implement this for you. And that's it. That's how you monetize it. But you're selling, in essence, a solution based around that framework that is your unique methodology, way, blueprint, map of getting your client from pain to gain, from problem to result.
So you talked about implementation. I agree with you. When all is said and done, more is said than done. And to know and not to do is not to know. So can you help anyone move forward? Do you have anything in terms of presenting into profit that you could offer my audience?
Yes, definitely. So we've got, the first thing they could probably do is go to we run a virtual event on a fairly regular basis. So they can watch this for the comfort of their own home or office. That's called Presentation Profits. So if they just go to presentation-profit.com, pretty easy to remember. And then, there'll be a registration page, and probably might have to wait a few days for us to run that program.
But you're running them pretty regularly.
Yeah, we run it pretty regularly. At the moment, they're a Wednesday and a Saturday. It might change over time, depending on people are listening to this.
Yeah.
And that's like a few hours, but it's highly engaging. It will tell them exactly how to both prepare and perform a presentation that, in essence, will get them investment, builds their credibility and authority, wins them new business. Yeah, in essence, it's everything I've learned over 19 years and all the mistakes I've made and why you don't need to make them anymore.
Yeah. So I just want to tell everyone as well, Andy, that you were the first person I ever saw that spoke on stage, and I could see, wow, this is a way to inspire people and to make a great living. And I'm really of the belief right now, we're not in the industrial age anymore. So we don't have to sit on a factory line all day, every day, hoping to buy enough time with the small amount of money that we have to do the things we love, but not having enough time left to do it. I really believe you can merge your passion into your profession, your vocation into your vacation, turn your information into income, and turn what you already know into cash flow. I really believe those things. And I'm a very fortunate person because I get to do that on a daily basis. And I love public speaking. And I'll just be humble here, but between us two sitting on the table, we've done hundreds of millions in speaking revenue. I can say that.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage anyone listening, don't stop, don't pause, don't distract yourself. Go to presentation-profits, plural,
.com, yeah.
.com, because, Andy didn't hardcore sit down and train me end to end, but Andy has helped me along the way. You did review one of my presentations once I came to your house.
I have a little testimonial video somewhere that I think still gets shown every
You've
now
probably
and again.
done it right out of that yourself. Because I believe in always being a student. And if anyone's listening who is a bit scared, because I always carry that fear, by the way. When I go and speak alongside other speakers who are really good, I always carry a little bit of fear. But I would just say to anyone that does have that fear, get your ass over to that presentation-profits.com.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
That's all right. So let's do a bit of a quick fire.
Yeah.
So look, you can take as long as you like, but ideally 15 to 30 seconds answers we're looking for.
Okay.
So number one, is it true Richard Branson doesn't like public speaking on stage?
Yes, he likes to be interviewed only because for whatever reason he's chosen not to stand up there and present and speak.
So why do you think that Richard Branson hates public speaking when he's such an amazing leader?
He's very introverted, and I think he likes certainty. So every question he's asked is pre-planned and pre-prepared. So the answers, if you watch him once, the next interview is going to be exactly the same.
Okay. Who's the better speaker? Grant Cardone, Gary Vee, or Ty Lopez, and why?
Probably Gary Vee. Because he has, I think, the most authentic, be yourself, I don't give a shit attitude. He actually he does do a lot of Q&A stuff, so I quite like that because it's very intuitive, and I like that about speakers, that they're willing to stand up and just have stuff fired at them, a bit like you're firing at me now.
If you were giving Gary Vee one tip on public speaking, what would it be? Yeah,
probably I would say his eye contact when he's actually presenting. Now, when he's answering someone's question, he's got good attention, but a lot of speakers, they kind of spray their eye contact all over. But what a great presenter does is they look at someone and speak to them until the end of that sentence or thought. So you pick one person out of the audience, speak directly to them only. To get to a pause, like a comma or a full stop, you turn and look straight at somebody else and you present to them for the end of that sentence. Then you go to somebody else. So you're never ever speaking to an entire audience at the same time. It is look to one, speak to all.
Love it. What speaking advice would you give to Boris Johnson?
Get your hair cut.
What speaking advice would you give to Boris Johnson? I'm not letting you get away with that one.
So I think he, again, is quite a charismatic leader, so doesn't fall into the category of over-prepared. I think he just needs to be a little bit more authentic and really choose his beliefs, because I think sometimes his beliefs change depending on the moment.
There's this amazing speaker that's called Nick Vujicic.
Yeah.
I may have mispronounced that. Vujicic. Yes, I've butchered that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about him.
Well, he has no arms and no legs and no limits. That's his message. And I've spoken alongside him a few times in Singapore, I think, in Australia. And he's just incredibly good at storytelling. So that's one of the most important things about a speaker, is their ability to storytell. Because in a story, you can weave in so many amazing messages. As I like to say, if you don't want to preach, put a story in your speech. Because then what happens is, in the story, you're both training and teaching, leading, changing beliefs, but the client often doesn't realize that's happening. It's kind of happening very subtly, and that can really move an audience. Yeah, so he's brilliant at that. Absolutely amazing.
I want to come back to storytelling.
Okay.
So we'll do that after. Who's the better speaker, Donald Trump or Bill Clinton, and why? I
really like, from a speaking point of view, I like Trump's speak and say things shoot from the hip, because I kind of like that, but he will end up contradicting himself all the time, so that's the challenge. So I would say probably Clinton, because he's the more statesman-like. His voice is he's getting a bit older, so he's quite raspy in the voice, a bit like Tony Robbins these days.
Do you think that Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, has got a bit grumpy in his old age?
I don't think he's grumpy in his old age. I think he's always been grumpy. That's his style. It's not too distant to your style, actually, as in it's quite ranty. I actually heard of an interesting story, maybe you heard of it, that once, because he used to tell people at the break, you've got to come back from the break. So people came from the break late, and he locked the doors and wouldn't let them back in. It's like literally just would not. People had paid loads of money, said no, you don't come back in. Didn't do what you was told.
Yeah, I remember seeing him at National Achievers Congress years ago, and he was just bollocking everyone who was coming in late. Yeah, I remember thinking, I'm not sure it's going to be building the rapport you want, but
you've got to be funny with it. If you're going to do that, if you're going to use warrior, because that's what that is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it crosses over into dark warrior, as in controller. But if you're going to use warrior, you have to temper that with jester.
Yeah.
You have to be funny with it. Because if you're all that one way, people they're getting tired out with that. Yeah.
Okay. What's the worst speech or speaker you ever saw, and why?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so Michael Bay, people can look at this online. They go to YouTube and you type in Michael Bay fail or Michael Bay speaking fail.
Oh dear.
And so Michael Bay is like Transformers and stuff. He's a movie director, and he was on stage for Samsung conference. And he was there. They were asking questions, and in essence, they were trying to pitch this curved TV they'd made.
That was your phone, I think.
It was, yeah. And he was using an auto cue, and the auto cue failed. Like it stopped, and he's like, the auto cues. What type's all off? And he actually had another guy on stage with him, the MC, who then just started interviewing and asking questions. But he couldn't deal with it. He could have just asked the guys questions, forgot the entire script and did it. But he went, I'm sorry, and then just walked off. Literally walked off, and it was like the most, oh my goodness, horrendous moment in time. And that's the thing, is that's why I never would use an auto cue, because technology can go wrong. Like if you've got slides, they go wrong. You need to be able to do it on a flip chart. You need to be able to go to that. And that shows the real class when you can do that. And he didn't show it on that day.
Yeah.
All he had to do was answer the guy's questions. I mean, like, when you prepared the content, whose brain did it come from? Yours. If he answers the questions and you answer them, which brain did it come from?
Yeah.
Yours. Just that's it. Yeah.
I remember, actually, the first public speaking course I ever did was Chris Howard's public speaking course in Australia. And about day 2, they taught us utilization, which is anything that goes wrong can actually be the best part of your speech if you use it and utilize it. And that, I would say in the pub, I actually just got a little bit of goosebumps there because that moment probably liberated a lot of my fear of speaking. Because I think the thing we fear is being on the stage and it goes wrong and we stood there in front of loads of people exposed and naked and vulnerable, and you want when people actually say, I want the stage to swallow me up. But if we can use what happened as part of the speech and we know that we've got that tool in our armory, surely there's not much that can throw us off our speech.
Yeah, and what you learn to do over time is you learn that there are only a certain number of things that typically can go wrong. And then when it goes wrong, you have 1 or 2 different responses to that all the time. So like, for example, if a phone goes off, right? Some people are like, oh, turn your mobile phones before you begin, all that kind of stuff. I never say that. I want the phones to go off. So when they will go off, someone's fiddling with their bag and like all embarrassed, I just walk over, take their phone and answer it for them in the middle of the seminar. And I'm like, hey, so who are you after? Oh, yeah, Mary. Okay. All right, yeah, she's a bit tied up at the minute. What's that you say? Oh, okay. Right. It's the police. Yeah, apparently, yesterday, something with your neighbour? I'm just going to make some stuff up. Now, the person's disappeared, they've gone, and there's this idiot just going to got rid of it. But it's funny, and of course, everybody else knows, I can turn the mobile phone off after that,
Yeah, I love that. I always find it's funny when people try and open crisp packets really quietly, and it's really loud, and all you have to do is mention that, and just put the spotlight on them. So, that really, it really helped me, that did. So, the best speech or speaker you've ever seen, and why?
Yeah, I'll go back to Tony Robbins again, I think, just because he was my original inspiration, and just seeing the way he's able to take a huge audience and unite people into a one common feeling, and to create that kind of just complete unity where everyone's feeling like at the peak and like way outside their normal everyday waking state, so they can make decisions about their life, in a place they'd never get in a state to make them. And that's the key, like if you don't, as a speaker, if you don't move people outside their normal natural waking state, then they'll just behave as if they're inside that problem. You've got to get them outside the problem to see how small the problem really is. And the thing they've been writing about, go like, oh, it's easy. Right? But you can only do that when you get people outside, but to do that, you have to be extraordinary for a period of time, because you're not going to achieve that inside 20 minutes. Right, that's why his seminars go for 72 hours non-stop almost.
Have you had one major epic fail as a speaker that you can remember?
Yes, actually, the very first presentation I did, go back to the ego thing. So, the Cavernous Conference Centre, guy about there somewhere, and I said something, and he said something back, and because I was just so fearful, I completely believed he was challenging me. He wasn't. He was actually agreeing with me. But I was like in a fight with him over this, like trying to prove myself. So I know, I'm agreeing with you. I was like, oh, you dick, and I was like, red face came up. And another one. Sometimes you have this as well, like when you're presenting, and I thought like I said, you go and give eye contact to one person at a time, move to somebody else, never do this sort of scanning the audience. And I came across one guy, and he was like, he's not having a good time. She was like, and then I kept going to her now and again, thinking like, I'm going to pick him up in a minute, and like, still really stony faced. I thought he didn't enjoy it anyway.
Mark,
and then after, it probably was. And then after the event, I could see him queuing up, and oh no, like you're going to come and he's going to give her a piece of his mind. He comes out, he goes, that was the best speech I've ever heard. Don't judge people by their look.
Yeah. I have had a couple of people fall asleep in seminar of mine before, and I've obviously took that really personally, and then you find out they got in at 5 a.m. from a bender night out, which I understand will be you tomorrow, won't it?
Let's not talk about it.
All right then, I'll get you out of that one. Let's finish on storytelling.
Okay.
Because I know you think that's a huge part of speaking.
Definitely.
So why is storytelling important, and give us a couple of tips on storytelling.
Yeah, storytelling is so important because in a story, you'll have a theme in the story. Every story should have a theme, because every great movie has a theme to it. And within that story, you can weave in so many wonderful messages that kind of have this magical effect that people don't realize. But the challenge that I experience is that, and this is how I used to be, and this is what I see in others that come to training now, is that what people think is storytelling isn't. Because you don't actually tell a story, you relive it.
Right.
And that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Now, to relive a story, you have to be in present tense to relive something. So when people normally tell a story, they're talking about it as if it's happened in the past, which it has. But when you tell a story, you have to act as if now.
Right.
So I'll give an example. One of my members of my academy, for example, I know her story beginning so well. This is Ruth. And Ruth's audience is typically for women who've been in controlling and abusive relationships. And she'll start her story by setting the scene. And when she sets the scene, she'll set it in completely present tense, because that's what we trained her how to do. She's got curiosity, intrigue. So she starts going, it's January 2001. It's a beautiful day. The sun's blazing through the bay window. And beyond the garden, outside, there's a cricket match going on. And I can hear the sounds of players shouting, the thwack of leather on willow. I can hear all those summery sounds, normal sounds. But they couldn't be in greater contrast to this churning of dark emotion I'm feeling inside. He's in the room. He's standing there, his shoulders framing the doorway. Why is he blocking me like that? Why is he stopping me? I want to get right. I want to run right past him and run and run and run. In fact, I want to walk up to him and say, "Get out of my house!" But I daren't. And so that's the beginning of a story. And they're like, you're captivated by that, because it feels like, as the audience, it feels like you're there as a fly on the wall. And that's important. And movies do that, because it's not a scary movie unless you're in it. It's not a thrilling movie unless you're on the bus, that can't stop or whatever.
Yeah.
So they'll use very clever work. So they'll use very clever camera work. So an example of that is, it's a really good example is, remember the movie Titanic? Of course. At one point, the lifeboats are out, and there's an establishing shot where you can see from effectively another boat over there. And then the next shot is you're in the boat. Right, so the camera's now in the boat, and you're looking over the shoulder of someone, and there's a dialogue going on. One person this side saying, "We need to go and save the people that are crying. We need to go." Then this person saying, "No, we're going to stay exactly, keep ourselves safe." Right? And you're now in that boat, which means you have the same dilemma as the people in the boat, which means you're being posed a question. What would I do if I was in the boat? And that's what a story does. It takes you on a journey to explore scenarios and situations such that you can come forth and go, that's what I would do. And it reinforces or has changed a belief about yourself. Powerful.
So if there's one thing listening to you, I'm critiquing myself on as a speaker, because I've done well more than 1,000 speeches and I get paid good money to speak. I can often go into monologue and narration a bit too much, into the lecture mode. I can become the lecturer as opposed to the storyteller. So I'm sitting here very inspired by you, because I've got some great stories and I often think I've got to fit a lot in. And so, one of my early public speaking mentors, he said, facts tell, stories sell.
Right.
And so thank you for that re-inspiration, Andy. I know that you're a big fan of storytelling, and I know that is part of speaking, but it's also its own thing. Do you have any speaking resources specifically around storytelling?
Yeah, we do. So we have actually a program called Storytelling Secrets. And if you want to get that, I'll happily give away a free copy for your audience if you'd like me to.
I would. I'll be getting one of those.
Yeah. And actually Ruth's story there is actually in it. We break down her story that we just heard, so you can see how it works and why it works, because there's a lot more to it, of course, than that. So they go to, it's very simple, so my name, so www, obviously, andyharrington.com/story. So pretty easy.
Andy Harrington.
AndyHarrington.com/story.
And they're going to get some resources on telling stories and seeing you breaking down stories.
Yeah, no, it's a whole program. There's actually more than that. So there's storytelling secrets there, which breaks down, what we call our Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, because every story is broken down to 3 acts. Act 1's called the problem, Act 2's called the journey, Act 3's called the transformation. So it teaches them how to build their own stories about their own personal story of why they do what they do. We break down how that works with different examples. But also I've got a separate product in that they can get with that as well, which is called anecdotal stories, which is how you build stories that are not about you, but they have very valuable learning points attached to them. That's a different skill. There's also how to make them laugh, because a story should at least have at least one part where there's humour. So I'll show them how to make them laugh as well. That's in there as well. Is there a third thing in there? I can't remember, but there's at least those 3 at the very least. So yeah, pretty cool.
I remember seeing Les Brown speak, and I just thought, wow, it's just one whole story. It's just story after story after story.
That's right.
What do you think of Les Brown as a speaker?
Oh, I love him, yeah. In fact, an interesting story. I spoke alongside Les for the first time X number of years ago, and I've always admired him. I say it was in Perth, actually, Perth, Australia. And it was 5,000 people there or whatever. And I knew he was speaking as one of the guest speakers, but I didn't know he was there, right? And I went to the green room afterwards, and I kid you not, he got down on his hands and knees and was doing like this to me. I was so, in one way, like thrilled and delighted, but I'm also, a bit embarrassed by that as well. He said, what you just did there was amazing.
Wow.
I was like, Les, firstly, thank you, but also, the reason I might be even remotely as good as you're saying I am is because people like you went first. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and you're one of those.
Yeah. I love his little laugh that he has in between his dialogue. It's great.
Yeah, no, he's incredible, and he quotes. He's very generous in that. In a story, he will add what I call impact lines. A joke has a punchline.
Yeah.
A speaker should have impact lines. And he will always quote other people's impact lines, and he will always quote that person.
John DeMartini does that as well. I think that's important. Yeah. I think sometimes when we're creating our own UBS, we almost feel like we have to create completely unique content all the time.
No, you can, it's okay to quote other people's content or their belief statements, if you want to call them that, as long as you do. That's just kind. It's kind,
and it also shows that you're well studied.
Right.
If you can reel off everyone else's quotes, you've clearly learned something.
Yeah, it adds to your message and take it away.
It's also good when you're starting out if you haven't got any of your own.
Yeah, correct. Exactly right, yeah.
But sometimes people just nick stuff, don't they? It's just not the same.
Yeah, well, if you quote somebody else's, like a lot of people quote, the Marianne Williamson quote and think it's Nelson Mandela because he quoted it. But it actually, and they thought he created it, but he didn't. It was Marianne Williamson who did that quote, but he's more famous. So that will often, sometimes, if you don't say who said it, then they will think it's yours originally. Yeah. Even though you're not maybe claim it. So it's important to maybe say who else owned that statement. Yeah.
So Andy, where can we follow you? Where are you on socials? Where are you mostly active? Or do you have, or your website? Anywhere?
Yeah. So AndyHarrington.com. Yeah. The first thing, if they go to AndyHarrington.com/story, that'd be a great start for them if they're really interested in story, and if they want to dive straight into how to do the full kind of presentation. Again, it's free. All the stuff I'm giving is free. They can come to our virtual events, and that's, what did I say that one was?
You're asking me?
Presentation-profits.com. Yeah.
Andy, I've had a lot of fun. Have you enjoyed it?
I did.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, surprisingly, we've had fun.
Yeah. Life's too short not to have fun. So let me know what you thought of the interview. Certainly public speaking changed my life. I think between Andy and I, we've made a good few 100 million as public speakers. I would definitely encourage you to get into public speaking and face those fears. Now, to get access to Andy Harrington's storytelling secrets, make sure you go now to andyharrington.com/story. That's andyharrington.com/story. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notification bell on.